Imagine for a moment that provinces can no longer collect taxes on oil companies, the provinces can no longer oppose oil and gas projects, and that even sharing a pamphlet about an environmental protest would be effectively illegal. Just 6 months ago, the prospect of environmental protests becoming banned in Argentina seemed ridiculous, as did the idea that oil and gas companies would not have to pay taxes. But that effectively is now very close to happening there, and it should be a wake-up call for us here in Canada as well. In this episode of the Environment in Canada podcast, I talk with Juliana Orihuela about Argentina's environmental protest ban and how that ban benefits international oil and gas companies like Equinor, the Norwegian majority state-owned oil company, and how all the things that are happening in Argentina should be a warning and a wake-up call for the rest of us as well. I'm Conor, Head of Communications with Sierra Club Canada. And if you're new to the podcast, the Environment in Canada podcast is a podcast about the environment in Canada by Sierra Club Canada. Before we begin, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. ET. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe so you get the latest episodes from us. Juliana, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
For everybody listening in, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Juliana Orihuela. I am from Argentina. I live in a very small town in a coastal community called Necochea, near the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and I am a member of Asamblea por un Mar Libre de Petroleras, which is like a citizens' assembly who's trying to protect the ocean from the oil companies that are starting to expand their offshore projects here in our shores.
And there's been a lot of interest recently, it seems, from those companies in expanding offshore. I know one of those companies is Equinor, which is the Norwegian majority state-owned oil company. What is it that Equinor is doing in Argentina?
We were not very close to Equinor. We didn't know precisely that this enterprise has already been working in Argentina inland in a very big extraction field called Vaca Muerta. Equinor also works there, but now we have started this unwanted relationship with this company because it's the main shareholder for the new offshore project that the Argentinian government 3 mandates before offered 38 sites of the ocean in order to these oil companies to come and make their exploration and exploitation. So Equinor holds 8 blocks in the north and in the south of our coasts and is in charge of the biggest 3D exploration, which consists in a technique called seismic exploration, which is blasting the ocean with very harmful sound. And that is very bad for our fauna. In fact, we knew that this was all happening because dead whales started showing in the shores, which is a very not common thing to see. We see other kind of small fauna that dies in their migration route, but we have never seen dead whales. So when they started to appear in the shores, we noticed there was something bad happening.
So in the phase of exploration that they're just doing exploration at this phase. They haven't finalized any decision on a final investment project for a major oil project. They're hoping to find oil, basically. They're expecting to find oil.
Yes, there were some news about an oil discovery in Namibia, which prehistorically was very close to us. And that's why they think we have also all that oil down in the bottom of the sea. Project is very big. It's still in its exploration part. They are doing now, Equinor is now in this moment drilling the first ultra deep water well. So that's an exploration well. It's called Pozo Argerich. It's taking 166 days. And when they finish, they will take a sample of the oil they found there in order to see if it's a productive well, and if the material they can get is, if they can sell it, if it's useful for their production. So we have big hopes that what they found is not enough or not good enough for them, that could be like something hopeful. We can wait. The permits were finishing on June 15, but they were granted one more month. So we might have the results at the end of July this year. And
Right.
that will give us a new perspective of what's going to continue with the project, if they can continue drilling or not, depending on what they found in this well.
And what's the consultation been like on this with communities, with those involved? Like, has there been much consultation, or sort of what format has it taken?
Since the approval of a law called El Acuerdo de Escazú, which is for Latin America, our government was obliged to make these public hearings and consult the community what they think of those big projects that might endanger the future of our generations. This has been taking almost 4 years, and we've been participating in every process. Each time the community speaks, the answer of the community is no, we don't want this kind of projects. The problem is that the enterprises and the government has very quickly understood how the hearings work, and now they're filled with people that work in YPF, for example, that is our own oil company, or
Hmm.
filled with people that works for the energy clusters or every small industry that might be interested in the advance of this project. But the biggest problem with these public hearings are that they are not binding. So people think they're spending their time, losing their time, because they keep coming to these hearings telling the government that they don't want this kind of projects, and the projects continue. So it's
Hmm.
like a nonsense in a way.
Right. And what other sorts of resistance has there been from the communities? Like, have there been protests?
Yes, there has been a huge protest. We already have a name for it. It's called the Atlanticazo. Aso is like a way to emphasize a word, so we're emphasizing
Okay.
the Atlantic. We're making it like a big Atlantic, because the project covers 4,500 kilometers of the coast. It starts at the north where I live, and ends in Tierra del Fuego, which is like the southest part of the continent. We've been protesting since day one for almost 4 years. Every fourth of every month, we go in the streets. We've been changing the protest, depends on the weather, depends on the season. So we've been
Mhm.
doing this kind of like protests in the seashore in the summer, with a lot of tourism getting together, because everyone loves Mar del Plata, which is the epicenter of the protest, which is like one of the main vacational cities in the coast, Mar del Plata, very close to my hometown. But the protests have already expanded not only in the coast but also mainland. So everybody knows what an Atlanticazo means, and we've been having help from many other territories that have been fighting oil companies also.
Mhm.
So we go to schools, for example, which is a very important part of the job, because children are very curious, and they are like family changing, family changers. They can make their parents talk about this kind of problems. If their parents work in a local commerce, they can start talking with the people that work with them, and it's
Mhm.
another way to make it a different change, a different chain of opinions, that it's not only the protests outside, noisy and disruptive, but also like small, slower, but constructive.
Hmm. And building a dialogue too between, I always say it's funny because we're already impacted by obviously climate change, and we're already impacted by the results of biodiversity degradation. But it is one of those generational things too, right? Where there's a lot of people out there for whom it's like, well, that's not really, and then to be able to chat with their own kids about these topics, to be able to talk to the generation that's actually going to deal with a lot of this, right, directly is probably very eye-opening, I would hope, for them.
Yes, we try to be nice. We try not to scare children. but
Right.
but we really think they should know the scale of the problem, and that we are not opposing this because of our ideology or because we think foreign enterprises should not do this kind of things. We're doing this because of climate change. That's what you're telling. 2023 was the year in which six of the nine tipping points of nine of the 15 ecosystems of the earth trespassed their tipping points. So we don't really know what's coming.
Hmm.
We really don't know what's coming, and they should be aware of that. So the decisions our politicians are taking now will really affect their lives. And what if I don't think we all should run for presidents, but at least we should all have the chance to decide within our families and in our communities what do we want for the future. So maybe if we put this conversation into families and schools and I don't know, sports centers, places where people socialize and share their culture values, maybe we can start changing things from that side also.
Well, I think it's an excellent point because like protests, for instance, are one tactic, right? And it's something that raises a lot of attention sometimes to a cause, but then you also run into the as you say, the same thing. It's loud and it's noisy and it's not for everybody, right? So like half the time nowadays when we're chatting with people, it's like how do you sit down and have conversations? And it's almost a lost art in some ways. Like a lot of people don't necessarily we've kind of lost a bit of that capacity to go to other people and have one-to-one conversations. And I don't know, maybe we never really had it. I don't know, but and maybe I'm biased coming from a smaller place, right? Like I grew up more with when there was an issue, a lot of people would sit around. It was more kind of town hall focused, maybe a lot of the activism I initially did than protest focused. Yeah, people would just sit down and chat about things, but
Yeah, we don't chat anymore. What I think in a way is like I'm becoming 50 this year, so I'm not very powerful in social media and everything that goes, so it's related with technology is a missing. We haven't got many young people fighting with us, so I think we're losing that part of the battle.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, if things become as complicated as they can become with the energy provision for everyone, or if we don't start talking about consumption, all those social media things are totally related with the energy, power
Yeah.
stations, and things that are going to become weak and fragile due to climate change. We in the coastal cities are having bigger storms, bigger weird climate situations that we don't know, that we cannot expect, that we're not aware and we're not prepared for. So taking the conversation also to the risks that we're facing because we're not doing anything to stop climate change, allowing this kind of oil projects is a link we have to do. The thing that has created the biggest factor for this situation of climate change we're in is the burning of fossil fuels. We don't have to forget that ever in our conversations because that gives us the strength of the science behind us and the common sense. Everyone is feeling what climate change is doing to our changing our daily
Yeah.
lives. So we just have to continue putting that into the conversation every time, all the time.
Well, and it's funny, we are recording this while there's a heat wave currently where I am, and like it's extremely yeah, it's quite intense. A lot of people are in the middle of that and are feeling it, and it does previous heat waves like this have led to a lot of deaths in Canada, right? Like it's something that is unavoidable. I walk outside my house and I see it, and I don't necessarily think that a few years ago even we thought about climate change quite that way when we experienced it, right? Or, the number of severe storms or wildfires that we see now versus like a long time ago. I want to just shift over a little bit to, with regards to Equinor specifically, how much engagement has there been with the company itself? Has the company shown much concern for communities? Is it, I guess this is a Norwegian majority state-owned oil company, right? So one would figure they might have some interest in that.
Okay, so Equinor was not well known in Argentina before. When we started talking about these oil projects, we barely know how to pronounce the name of the company. Now everybody knows it, which is like a good point in what we've been doing and working. Equinor at the beginning was not very engaged in asking or chatting with the community. They quickly learned, so when they started, it was the northern part of the project, and we were not consulted. But when they started with the southern part, they tried to reach the communities and the assemblies that are located there. I think that the most engaging conversation we had with Equinor was the chance that we had to talk to them in Norway. They have not been that open in Argentina. Many of the protests in the capital of the country have been in front or outside Equinor premises. They were not allowed to get in. They have like a huge park outside, and people from the protests were not even allowed to get inside or close to the premises.
Hmm.
And police was always there. So things are very different here than in Norway, where you can get to speak with the vice president of the company or even take part in one of the AGMs where they decide what they're going to do or vote for a different kind of projects. So Equinor is very aware that they have to be careful of what they do, but they don't sell oil here, so we don't have any where to protest. We there's no way to.
There's the offices, but there's not like, yeah, the
Yeah.
Equinor gas station or something like that is not.
And the offices are only in one town,
Yeah.
like in the capital city, and then we are a very huge country, not like yours, but everything is very long distance, so we're not able to go to Equinor's premises to protest every
Well,
month.
and I wonder, was it a bit like when they did do the like you say they reached out to the communities, was it a bit like, well, we have to be seen to have done this, so we sent an email sort of thing? Was that kind of
Yeah.
the okay?
They
Uh,
send an email by Instagram.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And then, well, the community answered that we were not interested in speaking, that there's nothing they can tell us that will change our minds, that what they're doing is wrong,
Right.
considering
So like a
what.
pretty blatant no, we don't want you here.
I
Right.
mean, we are not changing one source of destroying by another. So we don't want any solar park or wind farm or any kind of project that is still centralized. Uh,
Hmm.
the communities were thinking about decentralized and distributed new ways of powering our lives. So the
Right.
biggest projects that this kind of enterprises are proposing has nothing to do with we are thinking of as a way of staying in the earth without destroying everything. They only know how to make profits. They're not thinking about our lives or our well-beings. They're thinking how to get more money out of this. So there's no kind of conversation. There's no possible conversation.
Right. Well, we run into this with some of the community energy democracy work we do here, right? Where a lot of communities are like, yeah, we'd love to invest in alternative things that would allow us to get off of gas and stuff like that. We just want to have control over them. There's always kind of an interesting thing there where like communities more than anything want autonomy, the ability to actually make decisions about their own lives and the way that they get their powers. So it's interesting to see that. So Equinor does this, and you've gone to Norway, I know, to go speak to them. What was the dialogue like? Did they finally listen, or was it just
I don't think any kind of conversation we have is going to make them stop doing what they're doing. I think many of us activists have used, not precisely me, but some of us have used the precise words and has already said all the truth that has to be told in this story. Doesn't matter what we say, they are not going to stop. The thing is that what I consider the most interesting thing or part of the story, what we're doing with Norway, is the alliance between people. knowing that people in Norway knows what their government and their big enterprise is doing is very powerful, because then you get like a different kind of support. Now we might move to the legal things in Argentina and how everything is going to change for our security. And this kind of links we're building, this solidarity links we're building with the rest of the world, is stronger and more important than the conversations we can have with the enterprise. It's important to have the conversations with the enterprise because they know who they're talking to and how stubborn we are. So maybe that's the most important part of it. But what has been like the richest or the more nutritious part for me is the solidarity and the binding links we're creating between different countries. I think that is very strong and powerful.
It's a wonderful thing to be a part of and to get to meet you and so many other people through it too that are involved with such similar struggles sometimes against, particularly with Equinor. I mean, it's amazing. And I've said this, we've had a couple of other podcast episodes specifically on Equinor as well. And it does feel like just a very similar thing happening everywhere they go. Like we have a bit of a different situation in the sense that I think Equinor in Canada could actually do a lot of renewable energy work here, right? And there's that precedent is possible in the Canadian context. But despite that, like difference in what Equinor could be doing right, we see the same things in what they're doing wrong, right? Like we see the same lack of consultation, the same complete disregard for climate science, the same sort of thing. So I sort of like to set the stage here. You've gone through like all these different avenues. Then yeah, as you say, protest is kind of like what you've got left, and talking with people in communities. But I understand that in the Argentina situation that the rules around protesting are currently changing quite a bit. So I'm curious to hear what exactly is happening with regards to that and why is it so concerning?
We're in a very bad situation right now. Our government, it is decided to sell every natural resource we've got left. So in order to do this, because we had a very wonderful constitution and a very wonderful set of laws that allowed us not only to protest, but also to protect every resource we have. And this new government has decided to create a bill with 600 laws. He couldn't pass that bill, but 300 of those laws have passed, has gone to one chamber to the other, from
Mm,
deputy chamber to Senate chamber. And the senators have approved them, those 300 laws. Some of those laws allow foreign enterprises to come and exploit our nature for 30 years, paying zero taxes, and also given all the conversation and all the legal aspects to international courts. So not only the provinces that owned the resources have been taking that power away, but also
mm,
in this 300 laws, there's also changes to our rights to protest. So now every protest is going to be treated as a terrorism act. And they have also changed, they have published yesterday a resolution that is called productive security. So the government is now protecting the enterprises against what we, the community, can do to protest against their exploitation and extraction of our natural resources. So it is like mind-blowing to see how your own life changes from one day to the other. And 6 months ago, you live in one of the most incredible countries with a nice constitution and block of laws that allow you to be free to marry someone of your own sex, to do many creative and fantastic things with science and having public education. And 6 months after, everything goes away and all your reality changes. How does a culture continues like this, it's like incredible. And the most worrying thing was that the day they passed this 300 laws, 33 people were jailed for protesting. They have been having to release them in these days because there were um, no proofs that they were doing any kind of terrorist act. They were
Right,
just
because the laws
standing.
haven't even passed as well yet, so they can't classify it yet as that. And what were those protests specifically to the passing of these laws, or like the people who
Yeah,
were
exactly.
okay?
While the Senate was trying to approve these laws, there were thousands of people outside saying, "We don't want this kind of laws. We don't want
Yeah.
foreign enterprises to come and take everything from our land, leaving no money, and also leaving us with no right to protest against this kind of things. What are we going to do then? Just sit
So,
and watch them?"
well, like to put this in context for the Canadian listeners who are going to be listening to this, right? Like at the moment, like our tax scene of oil companies is not great. Like they get away with a lot. They get to take a lot of profit out of Canada. But the provinces get a cut when there's an oil project, right? The state does get a cut. It goes back into our healthcare system. It's part of the issue in shifting away from oil, and something we need to address is like what right, how do we build up things that can provide that alternative income for sure. The idea in Canada of, you're not going to have that, it's mind-boggling, but then you say that to yourself, like that was mind-boggling for you 6 months ago that was the case.
I think I never expected that we could have this kind of authorities in the government. I thought our culture and democracy system was stronger, and I thought we pressure and value our rights and the way we used to live, our freedom, our capacity of teaching, creating. There are not many countries like Argentina in South America. I'm not a very nationalistic person, but I was pretty proud of and very happy to be an Argentinian person. It's like a government full of hate, which promotes individualism and all the things that the communities don't want. We've been trying to build a different kind of knowledge that has to do with sharing, distributing, regenerating, and our new government only speaks about money and maybe that's the point. In Argentina, we were facing a very high inflation rate, and our money was disappearing from our pockets. So maybe that was what put
Hmm.
us into this situation, like a desperate situation related with economy. And so people said, okay, if this has to get all on fire, let's put this on fire and start again. But I think normal citizens were not aware of the horror of this kind of laws that are going to be passed. It's been taking the government 6 months to approve these laws, try to pass this 600 laws, and they couldn't. So
Hmm.
it's been taking them 6 months, and we've been fighting against this bill. Some of us are really aware of what kind of things are at stake, and that's why we've been
Hmm.
protesting against it. But well, they finally approved them. Now this bill is going to go from the Senate to the Deputy Chamber in a couple of weeks, and then we'll see if they get to approve them totally or not.
So if I understand correctly, if I walk outside in Argentina underneath these new laws, and I have a sign that says Equinor go home, that's an act of terrorism underneath these laws?
Before that, even when we publish flyers saying we are going to protest, that is also an act of terrorism
And
because
these aren't civil disobedience. You're not talking about actually breaking anything or breaking any actual laws here. You're not saying let's go blockade this street or something. You're just talking about protest in general.
Yeah, there's also a part of the law that's called like cybersecurity. So now everything we publish in the webs and then the Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn or whatever you publish your information to share with your community is going to be revised by the government and could be used to show that you're organizing this kind of terrorist acts. So I don't know. We will have to be very creative on how are we going to continue doing our work. It's going to be like a new something totally unknown. I don't know. We will have to be very creative. Everything is changing a lot.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what you do at that point because I mean that's if you can't go online and you can't say anything and you can't like that's a ban on protest in general of any sort because if you can't go online, you can't say anything, you can't get together in a group. Like how does that work? Can you still meet?
When those 600 laws we had at the beginning says that if there were three of us together in the streets, that was like considered a crime. And
Wow. Okay.
that didn't pass.
Okay. Okay, thank God. Thank God. Yeah, that's
But
something.
but that was the first line of the law. Like three of
Yeah.
you outside together, not allowed. Like, come on, it's a democracy. What's happening?
Yeah.
So everything is like nonsense. I know. I mean, 6 months in order to pass those laws, fighting one chamber to the other and people outside all the time, shows that those laws were written by the lawyers and the security companies, and they are all created in order to protect their businesses, which is stunning. We've been talking with lawyers that have been analyzing the law, and it's incredible. Like you see them, and they look like security companies, like the same, like how do you call that when you secure your car, for example, what do you
Yeah,
feel?
it's a security private security.
All the texts and the laws are written like written by security companies, not by lawyers or politicians or people in the social community at
Yeah.
all.
And so, because that's the thing that we're seeing too. Like, we've seen a definite increase in Canada around inflation, right? Of oil companies, particularly oil and gas companies, trying to blame environmental policies of any kind for, or any sort of tax on an oil company for all of the harm that's ever being done to the economy in Canada. And we see them try, even while, we know that it's actually the profits they're making off of oil and gas, right? Like in Canada, of every dollar of inflation over a 2-year period in Canada, 25 cents of every dollar of inflation went to oil and gas and mining profits. Nothing like environmental policies didn't even compare to that in terms of any sense of scale. Even the most costly environmental policy doesn't have anything to do close to the amount of money you're paying in inflation off to some CEO somewhere. So it's scary to me that the same people who probably run in the same circles of private security are like now writing laws around this. That's really terrifying.
Yeah, I think they move alike everywhere, and I think they work exactly the same everywhere. So you can see even in the security tactics, they're all the same. You can
Yeah.
see like all the equipment, everything is like copy. So they're just implanting the same program everywhere,
Hmm.
and it's in all levels. But I think that what we have to do is like try to address each time something really weird or bad happens with the weather, put it into the reality of the daily lives of
Yeah.
everyone. Last year we had a very huge storm that blew away the roof of a gym, and
Okay.
17 people died.
Wow.
That was a terribly tragic accident.
Yeah.
Nobody related that with climate change, and we have to start doing that. I think that's our only resource now, like addressing very strict to science, showing those heat waves, everything that's happening. with the climate that it's on daily news. We don't have to get used to that. We have to emphasize and not just repeat that, but like really link that to our daily lives, because maybe that's the only way people is going to react. When we have to, I don't know how, but we really have to make people understand that water is more important than money. For example, here, the mining companies are already showing their interest in mining all our mountains. And there's where the pure water comes from. So that's not
Hmm.
happening in my province. I don't have any mountain where I live, but the
Right.
water I drink comes from there. So
Yeah.
everything is linked together, has to do with capitalism, consumerism, and the way and who runs the power. So I think this tragedy of climate change and climate chaos is also a very good opportunity to start again.
Hmm.
What we've been doing brought us here. There's no sense in continue doing what we've been doing, because where we are is not exactly a nice place for many of us. Half of the people in Argentina is under the line of economic
The poverty
income.
line. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do we continue doing this kind of things? Why do we hold to something that has brought us here? Why don't we use this opportunity as a chance to start again with a different perspective, putting
Hmm.
other things in value? If we're not going to be able to produce energy for all the things we do, why don't we continue making cigarettes? We cannot continue spending and producing things we don't need. So I think that even the news are very bad and the situation is pretty alarming, we have to continue thinking this is an opportunity. Like, this is the decade in which the whole world has to notice and get
And change your
the
mindset.
yeah, and get the dimension of the problem we are in.
Hmm.
And the solution is very easy. We have already all the technology produced for that. It's just like changing the narrative, and it's obvious that none in power, any government in any country and any enterprise is going to start changing the narrative. So that's what we are doing. This kind of
Hmm.
products, this kind of conversations. We're shifting the point of interest. We're talking about life, protecting it, and the way to protect it is to oppose to this kind of enormous projects that are only extractivism and more colonialism in any way.
Hmm.
Happening north or south, it doesn't matter. It's enterprises, greedy enterprises, going through our rights of living.
Well, what I want to ask you about that, Equinor is obviously financially invested in all of this. They stand to benefit from this crackdown on protests, conceivably, because that means they will have no opposition if they do find oil and if there's something worth developing, quote unquote, there, right? For them, they stand to benefit. And it sounds like they've taken no real measures as a company to try and like hear from people and their concerns. Again, I think they often portray themselves as like the friendly oil company, right? That like and doesn't do this stuff. And that's other oil companies that go and do this stuff. What's your take on that? Do you think how does this affect Equinor and what should Equinor be thinking?
We have already planted the seed, and our trees are growing in Norway. Everyone there knows what their enterprise is doing in Canada, what their enterprise is doing in Argentina, what their enterprise is doing in UK. Everyone in Norway knows what Equinor is doing because we've been working hard on that, and we will continue doing that.
Mhm.
This last week's scientific rebellion were using our words, saying that their enterprise at Stavanger, every small city in Norway, the scientists from Scientific Rebellion are using our words and talking about the Atlanticazo. Doesn't matter if we are not allowed to speak of that in Argentina,
Mhm.
you are going to speak for us everywhere else. We have understood that we are very powerful, and they might not allow us to say that, but they will still allow you to say that. And you and everyone in Norway and everyone around the world is going to help us to continue this protest and this fight, because we we are right. They are wrong, and we all know that. So, as we are sure of that, we're going to continue. We're not lying to anyone. If you continue working with us and knowing what we do and following our work, you can see that it's totally nonsense what the oil enterprises are doing. So that's the easiest way to bring people close to us. And I think the solidarity networks we have created will blossom during this dark periods in Argentina. That's my hope.
Well, I think that concept of solidarity is key, especially when we see the removal of freedoms, a ban on protesting in Argentina, right? Like that means the rest of us have to, because if that's allowed to just happen in Argentina and the companies are allowed to win, then we all suffer. It's an attack on all of us, right? Like and the way and the progress we have been making in other places as well, like Canada. Canadians should definitely get involved. Is there anything they should be following or checking out or?
Well, so far we're able to continue publishing things in our webs, but I think that if they join your movement, they're also linked with us. So maybe it's the best thing to do is engage locally because you feel the power of the community, and that is very regenerative, and that is like giving you everything you need in your network to expand it. So get together. We really need to do this. This has no boundaries or frontiers. The climate chaos in which we are is huge. Everything that's happening with the permafrost and the ice and Greenland and the Arctic, and now with the AMOC, there's everything that's happening in the sea affects us very much. So, as we says here in Argentina, the sea knows no frontier, no boundaries. Whales know no boundaries. So we're all together in this. We really need to do this together, and starting locally is like the best way to start. So I think that's the best bridge we can cross from Canada to South America.
Final message for Equinor?
Yeah, we're not stopping, dear Equinor. We know very well what you're doing. We have a team of experts, which is incredible. We have like very intelligent, smart, honest people working with us. So we are aware of every movement you're doing. We have the resources, we know how to use technology. So we're not going to stop. We know what we're saying. We are science is behind us, and that gives us a very powerful tool to continue talking about what you're doing. So better beware because we're not going to stop protesting against you, and we're going to try to stop you as much as we can with this amazing team of people working together internationally.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
It was a pleasure, dear Conor. Thank you very much.
For the Q&A this week, and this is a chance for you to write in your questions to us, we're answering the question, what will it take for those in positions of power to act and put money and resources towards addressing global warming that's killing and forcing the displacement of so many people? How bad does it have to get? I just want to clarify before we begin that the answers to Q&A questions are not reflective of our guests on the podcast. They're just responses from us here at Sierra Club Canada. This is a difficult question to answer because things are already pretty bad. As I stated in the podcast, we're in the middle of a heat wave through large parts of Canada, and a previous heat wave that was in BC a couple of years ago killed hundreds of people, often those most at risk, those who are already struggling with poverty, those who are already in bad places. We know that homes that are too close to floodplains are going to have problems being insured, and people are going to have trouble getting mortgages in the future. And that comes at the same time as we're dealing with housing issues across the country. We know that other people's homes are already threatened by wildfires. We've seen the evacuations even this year again. And last year, we had to evacuate half of an entire territory. We saw the impact of extreme storms on coastal communities like Port Basque. I think in getting to all this, it's important to remember both the progress we do make and the things that we need to improve. And I say that because I think in the environmental community, we do have the tendency sometimes to forget about the wins that we have actually done. We've seen some huge successes here at Sierra Club Canada over the past couple of years in terms of policies like the emissions cap that we've been able to secure, thanks to pressure from supporters like you in terms of being able to fight back against misinformation, in terms of preventing new massive projects that are a detriment to our climate. And it doesn't mean that everybody on the side of making change agrees on everything. Again, it's funny, but if you talk to some people who support carbon pricing, they don't support an emissions cap. Talk to a lot of people who support the emissions cap, they may not support shutting down new oil projects. Those viewpoints at the same time may seem contradictory, and to an extent they are, but at least within that frame of reference, we have some sort of mode for communication because people are actually interested in a real solution to deal with a problem. Again, to be very clear on our side of things, we don't think any future oil and gas projects can go ahead because that's what the science says in order to do that. But you don't have to even agree with us on that to support common sense climate measures like an emissions cap that just make sense, that just hold industry accountable for its promises. And if industries decide to fail on those promises, shouldn't they be held accountable? If they lie about what they can do, shouldn't they be held accountable to those things that they have promised? I think that we've actually made a lot of progress in the last few years, and there's a lot more work to be done. We're seeing the shift in global economy away from oil and gas at a rate that is ever increasing. We're seeing people wake up to the fact climate change is in their backyard, in their community, that it has a huge impact on lots of other factors, whether that's housing or affordability. When we see this inflation issue come up in the news, and we talk about it, we need to talk more about the fact that a lot of that inflation is generated by corporate profits, including those for the oil and gas industry, which are a hugely significant contributor to the inflation you feel when you go to the store. We are actually making progress, and I'm not going to say anything for leadership in that regard. I think leaders do what they do because there's public pressure. And so the most important thing you can do is put pressure on them. Whether that's making a commitment that you're going to go vote, and you're going to vote, whoever you vote for, you're going to vote for the environment. When you talk to others, making sure that you're informing them of the latest things, making sure you're making a personal connection to them about why the issue of climate change has such a personal connection to what you're dealing with in your life, because we're all dealing with it. We all see it. We all see the people we love around us suffering as a result of climate impacts. And I think that's something that we need to communicate more on. And there's a tendency too amongst people who I chat to feel alone, to feel like we have to be supporting everything all the time. And the reality is there's lots of different variations on solutions and what we think solutions should be. And there's lots of room for engagement. What we can't not engage with at all is the idea that there should be no role for government in climate policy, that there should be complete deregulation. That's something I think we chat about in this podcast quite a bit.
It's an absolute must that industries must be regulated by government. They cannot be trusted to regulate themselves.
The line we need to draw is that we absolutely must accept the reality of climate change. And we absolutely must accept the reality that it's extremely serious. I know lots of people out there who think the same way you do if you're listening to this and you agree. Lots of people. In fact, we've sort of been convinced that we're alone in this, but actually when you look at the number of Canadians who are very concerned about climate change, it's a large number of people. So I don't know that there's any one thing that's going to get leaders to act. I think we've been able to do a lot of things to get leaders to do something, and some actually very important things as a result, almost exclusively of public pressure, I will say. But that's valuable. And at the end of the day, no matter what their reasons for doing it, having them do it is the end goal that we want. So I encourage you to get involved, to speak out, to participate in the legal and political and policy processes that you see fit to make a change for the environment, and to get leaders to act, and to get leaders working together to act. Because I think what we've also fallen into is this myth that the only way we can progress in society is through just debate We need leaders to actually support each other and to support common sense measures and to work together on them. And I think, too, the other thing to keep in mind is making sure that those fundamental freedoms that allow us to have that impact, that allow us to put that pressure on leaders, are being secured and protected and are things that we have the right to, because as you will have heard in this podcast, that can go south very, very quickly. We shouldn't hold any arrogance about that. We shouldn't say, well, that's somewhere else and that's not Canada. On that note, before we go, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. ET. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe so you get the latest episodes from us. And if you have a question for the Q&A, send it in to info@sierraclub.ca.